So our next sleeve is this one here, where we're keeping our original sleeve head, so there's no fullness added into the sleeve head, but we're adding fullness into the cuff here. And it's the same as the leg of mutton, just sort of like the upside down version of it. So what I've done is I've just traced out the block. I've put in the lines. We need to, because we need to open up the hem, we need to put in some guidelines. So I'm just running lines parallel to the grain line across 2 centimeters. So there'll be 4 guidelines plus the center line, the grain line. And these are the lines that we'll cut down or we'll use as our guide for pivoting fullness into the hem here. The other thing we have to do for prep, we're just going to measure across from the center line here to the side. So that's 8.6. And we're going to join this back up here. So we're already, apart from the extra fabric that will fullness that we'll add in here, we're also adding this onto the side seams, onto the underarm seams as well. So that's an easy way of adding some fullness, but we want more than that. So we've got those lines. Now we're going to take off. Our cuff is 6 centimeters wide in full scale. Half scale is 3 centimeters, and we want to take off half of this amount of length here. So half of the 3 centimeters we want to take off the length of the sleeve, because our sleeve at the moment, comes down, is that long. So we want to make it a bit shorter so that the cuff doesn't come too far down over the hand. So we're just going to take that 1.5 centimeters off the length of the sleeve. And the last thing we're going to do is just on these points, and usually I would measure halfway between these 2 points, but we've got this line here, so we'll use that as a guide. So we're going to come up 0.5 centimeter here on the front, and on the back, our half line, we're going to come 0.5 centimeter down, and then we're going to create a line to join these points together. And I'll explain how this works. So actually that's probably a bit, just smooth that out. It's a bit chunky at the moment. Yeah, so just a nice flatter line. So I'll be using this inside line and this one here. So what this does is that it brings up the front of the sleeve. So the front of the sleeve is a bit shorter and the back is a little bit longer, so that the cuff, when it sits on the body, it's a bit more representative of the swing forward that your arm has. So instead of the cuff being, like sitting straight down, it's swinging forward a little bit, and you've got some extra length along the back and shorter in the front.
Yeah, and you can really notice that even in that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's that, and it's as simple as doing that to the cuff. So got all of that done. So this is one I prepared earlier. So I've cut along that line. We've got our construction lines here. So what I'll do is just pop this over and we'll start drawing. So to begin with, we just need a line down the center of the page. This will be our foundation line. So we're just going to mark that at the top, and then marking this point at the bottom. So with our leg of mutton, we split this and opened up the top. With this one, we're going to split and open it at the bottom. So we're going to add in 2 centimeters or 4 centimeters full scale to each of these splits. So that's 20 centimeters in total we'll be adding in. And this one, because it's the center line, instead of going 2 centimeters that way and 2 centimeters that way, it's going to be a total of 2 centimeters. So we're just going to go 1 centimeter this way, 1 centimeter this way. So we just need to put in a little mark each way.
And that 20 centimetres, of course, is full scale. On these half scale, it's 10
Yes, but yeah,
centimetres,
exactly. We'll be adding in 10 centimeters half scale. So you can see I put the pencil at the top there, and then I'm just going to swing this line forward the 1 centimeter and then draw to our next point at the bottom and at the top there. Okay, so it was here, the line was here matching at the top, and then I've swung it forward 1 centimeter. So the top edge is changing shape, but it's not changing size. Not getting any bigger, it's just the bottom edge that's getting bigger. Okay, so then on the second one I put my pencil at the top again and swing forward. You probably can't see that, but that until that lines up with the 2 centimeter, and then from that line we go forward and forward there. And another 2 centimeters, so it's our last one, so we'll swing that forward, and even though it's not touching, we know that that's the 2 centimeters that we're adding on. And then we can go all the way to the edge. This line here was just our original underarm seam on the sleeve block, so we don't need to pay any attention to that. And then we just need to transfer our notch, our underarm notch there. Okay, so you can see the 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, 2 centimeters, which would translate to 2 centimeters, 4 centimeters, 4 centimeters in full scale. And then we're going to go back the other way. So pencil at the top, swing this line forward. We already have our 1 centimeter mark there from before. So then we go to the next one and down to the next one here. Put in our 2 centimeter mark, and then swing that one forward. And our last one, 2 centimeters. And it's our last one, so we can trace around the rest of the sleeve now. Just make sure our balance notches for the back armhole. And you can see that, see the difference between this. So it's nearly, 50% bigger than it was, but at the top there, we can swing this around and you can see that it hasn't got any longer. So it'll still be the same as sewing this a sleeve into the armhole. That doesn't change, but this amount of fullness at the bottom does.
And Mark, if you were just doing a flared loose sleeve, it'd be the same process, wouldn't it?
I'd flare it out like this.
Rather than just adding it all onto the edge, onto the side seam.
Yeah, I think we've straightened this here and we've added in this much, like from the original one here. But you just get such a nicer fullness coming out from the armhole if you do it in several different spots. Whereas if you were to start with this one here and literally just swing it out onto the sides there, I think you'd end up, this would be quite flat here, but then you'd have all of this excess fabric under here, which would just collapse in on itself. So I'd use this method even if you were doing even if you weren't gathering this in. And if you did, if you got to this point and then went, oh, actually that looks pretty nice, I won't put a cuff onto it, well then you could just sew this up and then do a nice hem on there, and that could actually be your finished sleeve. So we just need to find halfway, so 7. So I've just measured halfway between these 2 points here, and then I've come up 4 centimeters to create a slash to do the to have the opening. And with this one here, I've literally just folded it back 1/2 centimetre and pin stitched it, but it should be like a little double roll going back to nothing at the top. You would never do this even if that was overlocked, you wouldn't do that. You'd still tuck it under, and or put a bind over it as well.
Yeah, binding actually works quite well, doesn't it? Because you don't actually have any seam allowance or hem allowance on that split. You're sort of taking it away from the fabric. So yeah, bindings that can actually go around that edge, and then you're not losing any fabric.
Yeah. And it's a much nicer finish.
Yeah.
So this is our finished pattern piece here. So we've our bind slash there for our opening, transferred our balance notches onto the raw edge at the back, the top, the sleeve head, and the front notch, and 1 centimetres all the way around, 1 centimetre on the hem because we'll be attaching it to the cuff. And our cuff for this particular style is the finish measurements are 23 by 6, so that means it would be 23 by 12 because this edge here is on the fold. So if I was doing it, I would probably, if I was putting this edge on the fold, I would make, in full scale, I would make a complete pattern. I wouldn't have that on the fold.
And that 23 and 6, that's full scale, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Yeah, Libby. So these are So these 23 and 6 in the width, they're full scale measurements, and then you would add a centimetre seam allowance around those edges. And if this is on the fold, then obviously there's no seam along there. The other option would be if you want to put a seam along this outside edge to give that edge a little bit more body, then you would cut 2 of these. So you would actually have a seam allowance added along this edge. You'd cut 2, and then the outside one would be interfaced with fusing to give you a nice sharp finish.
What are the reasons for putting fusing into the cuff?
Just to give it some extra body, especially if you're working with, I mean, this doesn't have anything in it, but if I was making a shirt out of this fabric, I would definitely have the outside layer fused. And also too, because you're going to put a buttonhole on this layer, so the interfacing's there to help support the buttonhole and give you a nice neat buttonhole that doesn't stretch or wobble.
And how do you figure out how long to make the cuff?
That's a good question, Libby. I would measure my wrist, and then you've also got, remember that once this is done up, you'd have the buttonhole. So if we had a buttonhole, like, here, obviously the button has to go, well, I'd put a button maybe like a centimetre in from the top stitching there, so that would be 2 centimetres from the edge. So when that's buttoned up, you obviously get a crossover of the cuff. So you lose a little bit there. You lose whatever is in the crossover. So you can literally and I don't have a tape measure here, but you can put a tape measure around your wrist and then cross it over a certain amount and see where that's comfortable. This one has, if I do this, that probably has like an extra 3.5 to 4 centimetres of ease in the length of the cuff to fit around. So don't always get your wrist measurement and then add 2 centimetres and then seam allowances, because it'll be skin tight. So always give yourself, I'd say, at least 3 centimetres ease, added on to your wrist measurement, then the crossover, and then the seam allowances added on to that.
And the crossover might be 3 centimetres in total?
Probably
on one side and 2 on the other, or
maybe 2 centimetres, because you're only adding it onto one side.
Okay.
So 2 centimetres. But for a size 10, ladies' blouse, that 23 centimetres is probably a good one to go with, and 6 centimetres is potentially a little bit wider than general, but I think if you're working with a lot of fullness in a sleeve, the fuller the sleeve that you're making, the wider the cuff you'd have design-wise too.
So business shirts or shirts similar to the style they're making, say for their class exerciser probably only about a 3 centimetre cuff.
I think
right?
it's 4, but yeah, it is. It's a more classic style.
Yeah.
It's not, like, yes, the wider the cuff would go with sort of more of a fashion sort of shirt that you'd be making.